Hello and welcome to Newsmakers for this Wednesday, December 4th, 2024. I'm Louie Butko and thank you for joining us today. Well, yesterday, Ontario's Auditor General, Shelley Spence, released her first annual report at Queen's Park. She took a deep dive into a range of government actions and programmings in the year that was. And here to discuss is our Queen's Park producer, Randy Rath. And Randy, let's just start there with the Auditor General report. First of all, who's the Auditor General? What is her role? And what's the deal with this report?
Well, basically what the Auditor General does is they look at government spending and they decide if money was spent appropriately, if it does what people wanted it to do. And Shelley Spence, we didn't know what to expect because it was her first kick at the can. She only got hired last, I think it was in the spring, but she did a spectacular job. This thing is just filled with scandal, from Ontario Place to safe injection sites to you name it, and there's something bad going on in the government, and there's just this lack of oversight over pretty much everything that Shelley looked at.
The government ad spendings, we'll get into that, something that Doug Ford, candidate, was very critical of back in the day, but seems to have no problem with now. Like you said, this was her first one.
They spent more on advertising than any government ever has, and by a substantial amount, like 3 times what they spent last year. And what's that's indicative of is an election's coming. Government starts spending money on ads to prop themselves up and make themselves look good when they're planning on having an election. And I think that's definitely what is going on here. And, the ad spending, most of the ads that they put out this time, under the old rules, the rules were changed a year or two ago. And under the old rules, these ads would not have been allowed. They'd have been, taken off the air.
Yeah, and you mentioned $103.5 million for the year ending March 31st. So that was before, right? Now we've seen all these ads that, oh, hey, what if I told you you already live here? We got those ones running, which when I was in BC, the ending has changed, but they are running in British Columbia because they say, and what if we told you that province is Ontario? So it is interesting to see them spend so much. There's those U.S. ads that they have running now this week as well. Back to the Auditor General report, though. We knew it was going to be an issue, that being Ontario Place. Pretty damning. Also pretty damning that King of Surma wasn't anywhere to be found yesterday to discuss this.
Well, I'm going to cut King of Surma some slack. Apparently she's sick, and if you're sick, you shouldn't go to work. But that being said, the Ontario Place stuff is a complete fiasco. The government, this report revealed that they're spending $1.8 billion more than they had planned on. It was first spun to us that the Therme, the European spa company, first off, why do we need a spa? Louie, are you ever going to go to the spa? I'm never going to the spa. I might go. Oh, thank God we got a spa coming, nobody says that. But so anyhow, they spent $1.8 billion more. They're going to spend $1.8 billion more than they said they were going to spend. And when you delve into those numbers, there's a 95-year lease to Therme, right? They were supposed to return $1 billion to us over that period of time. Well, the Auditor General broke it down and said, well, $1 billion in this year's dollars, 95 years from now, is only going to be $137,000. And also, half of that $2 billion, or $1 billion that they were going to get back, that Therme was going to pay the government over time, is recouping the province of Ontario for maintenance work that they're going to do at the site. So it cuts in half the amount of money that they're going to get. So I don't understand the rationale for building a spa. I really don't. I never have. I don't know what is motivating them.
There's also discussions about private meetings that were supposed to be made official, but weren't, that they were taking these meetings ahead of time about knowing plans. Why isn't this Therme spa scandal a bigger deal? Does it feel like it's getting swept under the rug? I know at Queen's Park, everybody's talking about it. Merritt Stiles is making it a key talking point. I'm sure most people will make it a key. But it just seems like for most Ontarians, it doesn't scratch the surface of oh, well, they're doing it. They've already started. So what are we going to do about it?
Well, that's a really good question, Louie. I don't know why it's not such a bigger deal out in the general public. I know at Queen's Park, people are scandalized, and even more so now that they've heard further detail. One other thing, they're going to move the Science Centre to Ontario Place, right? Well, it came out in yesterday's report that it would cost the same or it would cost more. It's going to cost more to move the Science Centre than it would to rebuild, to retrofit, to make that building in Don Mills whole. So, I mean, that building in Don Mills is an incredibly unique thing. I mean, I enjoyed going to the Science Centre. I've got a good Science Centre story. The first time I saw our cows was at the Science Centre. There was an exhibit about the history of our science of rock and roll, and there's Max and the boys playing the thing. This was a long time ago. It was one of their first gigs.
That's awesome. The Science Center, yeah, the $700 million they say it's going to cost to retrofit it there at Therme. I think it goes back to the point that this government, and you and I have talked about this, they will stay steady at 40%. They will, maybe dip to 39 or 38%. But in the grand scheme of things, that's not going to matter when you have two parties to the left of them that are splitting that vote. In this anticipation, what do you feel, anticipation of the election, what do you feel like may have any sort of impact on the Conservatives' chances of not getting a majority? Because it doesn't seem like there's anything they can do right now to really affect their chances of running back another majority government.
I think that there's not a lot of question that they're going to get another majority. Even, yesterday, they held a press conference, several ministers, to respond to the auditor's report, and they just said stuff, to change the subject for a second to safe injection sites. The health minister just said, we're going to do more for people than just give them a clean needle when they hand us a dirty needle. So they've come up with a bunch of lines. They'll just repeat those lines no matter what they're asked. And, I think the public will get bored with it. Because unless drug users and people that are really suffering because of this, it's not on anyone's radar. I don't think.
No, and it does seem like they have picked their battles on like things that are super popular, like beer in convenience stores. Like they can run on that, and I'm sure there's 9 out of 10 people who are listening to this have stopped at the convenience store and may have overpaid for a 6-pack of Bud Light, but were convenience. They found it very convenient, and Doug Ford can run on that and say, look what I did for you, and he'll probably win again. Like I don't think there's anything that the Liberals right now, we're going to get into Bonnie Crombie in a second, I don't think there's anything that Bonnie Crombie or Marit Stiles can do to set the winds of sail in a different direction, because even with an early election call, Greenbelt scandal, Therme, Spa, there's nothing this Ford government can do that seems to hurt them. Well,
and he also picks populist things. I'm not sure if getting out of the bike lanes makes sense or not. I don't know enough about it. I've tried to learn more, but you hear two diametrically opposed viewpoints on it. So, they're going to get rid of the bike lanes, and I know where I live in Toronto, and Bloor Street and those bike lanes is very close to me, and they're a complete disaster. That's all there is to it. I mean, a lot of the businesses hate them because people can't pull up and park in front of them. It's ridiculous when you're driving down there this time of year, and there's like 2 bikes and 7,000 cars. And, I know all the arguments, like if you have a bike lane, people will use it, yada, yada. But Ford picks things that he knows people are going to get behind. And I think another thing that he's going to do before too long is go after encampments. Because when he was in Hamilton the other day, he was asked about encampments, and he quipped, people like encampments about as much as they like bike lanes. So I think that's foreshadowing for something that's coming up.
Yeah, no, if anyone would know, it'd be somebody who spent decades at Queen's Park on when to pick up on the cues there. Let's get into Bonnie Crombie, because it does feel like she's been getting a little bit of attention this week. A couple of profiles on her. Toronto Star had one. The Queen's Park Observer had one. This is really one of those ideas where she's trying to launch her second act, and that's why I was so shocked, Randy, to find out she was nowhere to be found yesterday at Queen's Park to respond to this AG report.
Yeah, I wondered that too. Why isn't she there? It turns out she wasn't there because she was prepping for the Liberals' annual fundraiser. They raised $1.6 million last night, and in that fundraiser, she spoke and she moved to the center. She lashed out at Justin Trudeau. You remember, what was it, last week in Nova Scotia, there was an election where the Liberals had held 2 straight majorities and they were just trounced by the Tories. The Tories ran against Justin Trudeau. So Bonnie is trying desperately. She said in her speech last night that she doesn't support the carbon tax. And I've never heard her say that before, but she was adamant. I don't want the carbon tax. It's the wrong thing to do. It's the wrong time. Let's get rid of the thing. So, I mean, she's trying to get public support to become more popular, but I don't know if she's got enough time left. She seems to be flailing about. And that piece that Rob Ferguson wrote in the Star the other day, that was anything but complimentary. I mean, you had Bonnie saying that she wasn't prepared for how difficult being the leader is going to be. I mean, you never hear a leader say that. Like, I'm overwhelmed by the job, essentially, is what she was saying. And, that's not smart politics to be saying that publicly.
Yeah, and I really liked some of the candidates that were running in that. Nate Erskine-Smith, I thought, would have done a great job. Not that I'm saying Bonnie isn't doing a job. She is doing it. But it just seems like it's a missed opportunity. Like you said, she's running at a time. We've gotten these hints that there's going to be election in spring. Her name recognition is going to be what it is as mayor of Mississauga. But again, some of these pieces, like you said, they're not complimentary. She's in over her head, it feels like. She's not good in scrums. I think Rob Ferguson put it at the point that, like, Mississauga never had CHCH going to them every day being like, hey, we need your answer on this, or the spec, or things like this. It just seems like she's a fish out of the water. And if you were giving the Liberals any advice, what would you tell them right now? What would you say to a party that's still not in official status, that it doesn't have the name recognition, that's running against the idea of the federal Liberals as well, that name attachment? What advice would you have for the Liberal Party in their caucus room right now?
I would tell them to attack the NDP as much as they possibly can, trying to eat away NDP seats, because they're not going to pick up any Tory seats that I can see. I think that Bonnie is as you say, a fish out of water. I don't think that she's entirely up to the job of being a leader of a party or the premier of a place as big as Ontario. And, I don't think, and I thought this from observing Bonnie, and I don't mean to be mean saying it, but I don't think that she has it. And it is an intangible thing that you could see in political leaders. And when you've been around the game as long as I have, you can see it.
Yeah.
And I don't see it in Bonnie. I see Bonnie struggling to answer questions. Bonnie doesn't seem to be incredibly self-assured. And that being said, I don't know what the NDP can do to garner more seats anyhow, because, they have split the left. And it's a problem for both the Liberals and the NDP. When you're only getting, half, a third, 2/3, whatever of the vote for people that want to vote left, you're not going to beat the Tories. And the Tories successfully did that, pitting the NDP and the Liberals together, and maintained power for 43 years before the 1980s. So, I don't think Doug will run for another election. I can't see him running another one after that. I can see him maybe making a federal move. But, it looks to me like the Tories could continue winning for a very long time.
Do you think any truth to the rumors? You think Ford would jump in immediately if something were to happen to Poilievre? There's that India scandal. There's that national security clearance stuff. Would you buy into that Doug Ford would be willing to make a quick jump into federal politics if something were to happen to Poilievre? Is he the next in line behind Poilievre, whether it's after this election, next election? Do you just find...
I don't think so at this point. I think that Doug is truly committed to trying to stop Trump's tariffs. And I think that he's really worried about the economy of the province. And, I genuinely think that he's an Ontario first kind of guy. I wouldn't rule out that he wouldn't run at some point. But I don't think that the upcoming election is going to be it. I can't see him bailing on the Ontario Progressive Service.
I believe there's, one more week of sitting in the Ontario legislature, a few more days of questions, right? So what are you looking for heading into this 2025, right? This is, we've seen, Sylvia Jones has been out and about. We've seen cabinet ministers out and about making announcements. They're passing bills. Things are getting through closure. What do you expect to see the next week or so before they break for Christmas? And what do you think the message is for MPPs over Christmas? Those ones who are going to their Santa Claus parades, who are holding New Year's levees. What do you think? What do you expect to see?
Well, I expect a very busy week next week with a bunch of bills being introduced. Those bills won't be passed until they come back. I think it's in February, like February 19th they come back, something like that. And I think they'll come back. They'll pass the bills that they've introduced next week. They'll probably introduce and pass a couple more bills. And then they're going to have an early budget in March, and then they're going to call an election and run on the budget, just like they did last time. I'm pretty much positive that that's what's going to happen. But as far as messaging from the Tories to people in at the Santa Claus parade or Christmas party sort of thing, I think that the Tories are going to say we have done a pretty good job overall. And in a way, the auditor said their fiscal stuff is pretty sound. They've got some glaring errors, but the province is doing okay economically. A lot of people disagree with that, but the Moody's just upgraded our credit rating this morning. So the provinces are doing that bad, and I think that the opposition parties will do what they've always done, and that's go out and say how horrible and terrible it is, and that is self-defeating in a way too, because you look at Bonnie and you look at Merritt, and they're always saying something negative, and people don't want to hear it, particularly over Christmas. Like my advice to them, also to the opposition parties, is try to have a more positive message. Bonnie's been trying that, talking about getting more doctors and whatever, but everything she's saying is the same thing that Ford is saying, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, in one way, it seems like it's going to be an exciting few months if there's going to be elections on hand. But at another point, it just seems like a foregone conclusion on what we're going to be voting for. So I'm not sure how exciting this upcoming election, if it's called, is actually going to be.
Well, I'll find it exciting.
Well, every election you find exciting. Come on, Randy. Randy Rath, appreciate you making the time, my friend. Thank you.
Okay, no problem. It's good talking to you, Louie.
Absolutely. My thanks to Randy Rath, our Queen's Park producer, for joining us. Always love checking in on what's going on at the Pink Palace with our friend Randy Rath. And hey, while you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to CHCH Podcast so you never miss an episode of this show or any of the other great shows we have for you, including the Trending Now podcast, which you can catch every Friday here on CHCH Podcast, hosted by yours truly. You can also catch Sportsline with Bubba O'Neill. Wherever you found this show, that's where you can find that show as well. I want to thank Laura Brody for directing today's episode. And one more time, thank you for tuning in. From all of us here at CHCH, I'm Louie Butko. Have a great day.